Yo, today we got South Korea is a dystopia. Like, comment, subscribe, got 100K, grind never stops. Journey to 1 million.
Chaebol is the Korean word for the
Happy New Year, happy 2025.
powerful family-owned conglomerates.
From anguish to frustration.
The arrogance of the rich and powerful.
Shout out South Korea.
An emergency dispatcher in South Korea receives a distress call from a child aboard a ferry.
Oh,
우리를 도와주세요.
help us to
제가
notice.
가라앉고 있어요.
The
Oh,
Seoul ferry is making a routine journey to the vacation hotspot Jeju Island, carrying
think I heard about
476
this.
passengers. Most are school children and their teachers on a class trip. The
damn.
dispatcher asks the boy to put the captain on the phone. If the ferry is sinking, why hasn't an adult called for help?
Uh-oh.
Not all passengers understand the danger. As the boat starts to tilt, some kids yell with excitement as if they're on a theme park ride. But soon, the disaster is undeniable.
Oh! That's actual footage?
Panic breaks out. Shortly after,
Is that actual footage? Oh, this is what went wrong. Oh, shit. This is actual footage, yes. Took that little shake. Boom! Oh, boom! Oh, here comes the leak. Oh!
breaks out. Shortly after, the 6,800
Bunch of
ton
water.
vessel sinks.
Damn!
If you've purchased a faulty car, you
Don't
can
worry,
get a
I'ma
massive
edit
payout
this
like
out.
this and get your entire car loan paid off for free. Take
Dang.
The boy who made the distress call and 300 other passengers, mostly other kids, drown.
Damn.
The tragedy traumatizes the nation. How
Alright,
could this
dude.
happen? Who is
That's
responsible?
crazy.
Initially, the crew is blamed for incompetence and cowardice. When the boat was clearly sinking, the captain told the doomed passengers to stay put in their cabins.
What? That's dumb. Don't move. If you move, it's more dangerous.
He and several
If you move, it's more dangerous.
crew members fled the scene and left the kids to drown.
Damn, that's crazy.
The South Korean president says their actions are akin to murder, and the captain is sentenced to life in prison. The Korean Coast Guard is also
Life
blamed
in prison?
for their sluggish response
That's
and
what he
for
deserves.
severely fumbling the rescue mission. Is sentenced to life in prison. The Korean
deserves
Coast
it.
Guard is also blamed for their sluggish response and for severely fumbling the rescue mission.
Oh, the Korean Coast Guard. That's crazy.
But then, an investigation reveals that incompetence isn't the whole story. The ferry was more than twice as heavy as it was supposed to be. It had been illegally modified to hold more cargo. More cargo, of course, means more
Need more weight.
cash. The nation is outraged that someone so clearly prioritized profit over
Why would they put children in there?
safety. Whoever owns the ferry needs to face the music. But who is it? In South Korea, corporate responsibility can be
Uh-oh.
hard to pin down. Family-run conglomerates control sprawling networks of subsidiaries. Complex structures often hide who's really in charge. Some families control so much wealth they're deemed nearly untouchable. Time
That's crazy.
and again they dodge responsibilities for crimes, yet continue to amass wealth and influence.
삼성 갤럭시 라운드.
Samsung.
In this video, we will look at 3 of these families, including the one responsible for the ferry tragedy. South
this is gonna be a good
Korea's
video.
elite families are so powerful and influential that many say they are the ones actually running the country.
Skip a little bit.
1950s, the South
Dang.
Korean economy is an exceptional success story. After the
Okay.
Korean War in the 1950s, it was one of the
Korean War
poorest
in the
countries in the world.
1950s.
Today, it is the
Oh.
14th biggest economy in the world. South Korea's rapid ascent is attributed primarily to its export-led economy and to the dominance of chaebol. Chaebol
Chaebol?
are large business conglomerates that are owned and run by family dynasties. Just
Okay.
after the war, the country's military dictators jump-started these family businesses with capital to rebuild South Korea's key industries. The chaebol thrived and diversified into sectors like tech, finance, and
Dang.
manufacturing.
They just kept going up.
In just a few decades, they helped transform South Korea into a global industrial
Hyundai.
powerhouse.
Hyundai.
It's often called the miracle on the Han River. South Korea's top companies, Samsung, SK, LG, and Hyundai, are all family-run
Hyundai.
chaebol.
Oh,
And
Hyundai.
chaebol revenues account for the majority of the country's wealth. Samsung alone is responsible for a significant part of the country's GDP. For 2024,
TVs.
Bloomberg Economics estimates a record high contribution from the company. According to their calculations, Samsung will likely
phones.
be responsible for about half of the country's economic growth. When we work
Damn.
stories like this one, we found it really helps to visualize the data. Brilliant is an amazing tool we've used to better understand
What was an ad?
Brilliant.
Ad.
tech
No free promos.
videos and day free /fern Korean economy.
There we go.
Alright, back to chaebol and their massive impact on the South Korean economy.
Nope, here we go,
Find
another
the
ad.
lowest priced health plans at healthforcalifornia.com.
Boom.
All this concentrated wealth leads to a lot of concentrated power. Chaebol families enjoy a very cozy relationship with the federal government. They receive subsidies, tax incentives, and special favors. And political leaders rely on chaebol for support and advice. For decades, chaebol were widely celebrated as the pivotal drivers of South Korea's economic miracle. But the 1997 Asian financial crisis challenged the standing of the families. 13 of the top 30 chaebol went technically bankrupt, revealing the risks of an economy relying so heavily on just a few companies. Nowadays, more and more South Koreans express concerns about the dominance of these conglomerates. Not only that, as the decades passed, the public watched chaebol repeatedly caught up in scandals and crimes, embezzlement, bribery, labor law violations, health crises. For too long, the government has gone easy on these dynasties, and the people are increasingly fed up.
Uh-oh. Nutgate.
In December 2014, Korean Air Vice President and heiress Heather Cho had an infamous meltdown. It was over a couple of macadamia nuts. A
Really?
flight attendant had the gall to serve her nuts in a bag instead
Oh my god.
of on a plate. Cho shouted abuse. She then called over the cabin crew chief and made him kneel to ask for
What?
forgiveness.
No way.
Under her orders, the passenger plane returned to the gate, where the cabin crew chief was fired on the spot.
Ain't no fucking way she fired him on the spot for not opening the nut packages. That's crazy.
If you're not Korean and you hear about this story, it might just seem funny or absurd. But in
Nah,
South
that's
Korea, it was
crazy.
fuel to the flame of growing public frustration. Yet
Really?
another reminder of chaebol leaders' arrogance and entitlement. They took their
They're entitled.
rage to social media and later the streets. At first, Korean Air tried to downplay the incident. They released
Wow.
the statement saying that because Cho's executive role was to oversee
Cho's executive in charge of the cabin service. What? No, that's crazy.
cabin service, it was only natural that she would discipline an offending staff member. But people weren't having it. The public already had issues with the
What?
Korean Air dynasty and their shameless antics. A few years prior, Cho's brother was investigated for pushing an elderly woman. Her father has been convicted of tax fraud, and Cho
Wow.
herself was criticized for strategically giving birth to her twin sons in the US, which exempted them from South Korea's compulsory military service. Eventually, Cho tearfully apologized and resigned from her post.
죄송합니다.
She was then convicted of violating aviation safety and abusing her power. She faced up to 15 years in prison, but was given the minimum sentence of 12 months. She only
Wow.
served 5 of those before a judge reduced her sentence. The chaebol's influence runs deep, all throughout the government, even to the very top. Already
Uh-oh.
in the 2012 South Korean presidential election, a key debate was on how to limit the power of these families. Park Geun-hye became South Korea's first female president.
Park Geun-hye?
2013년 2월 25일
2013.
대통령 박근혜
When she
Park
took
Geun-hye.
office, many worried it would be business as usual. Her father was Park Chung-hee, the military leader who took power in a
Park
1961
Jin-hee.
coup. He is considered the chief architect
Wait,
of the
what?
leader who took power in a 1961 coup.
Oh,
He is
damn.
considered the chief architect of the Chebo system, and Gyun-ye became her father's stand-in first lady when she was 22 after a North Korean assassin had killed her mother. Park Chung-hee's admirers credit him for the miracle on the Han River. His critics remember the cruelty of his iron-fisted rule and his imprisonment of dissidents. One of these was Miss Park's key rival in the election. His name is Moon Jae-in, a former human rights lawyer and anti-authoritarian activist during the dictator's reign. Now, in 2012, the ex-dictator's daughter campaigned on a more business-friendly platform than her liberal opponent Moon. She was focusing on reform rather than punishment. Her stance was that Chebo might be unruly, but with the right reforms, they could play fair. But then,
I don't know about that.
Seevol happened. This incident was much bigger than run-of-the-mill. This incident was much bigger than run-of-the-mill embezzlement or tax evasion. Faced with a furious and traumatized public, Park vows to bring the accountable people to justice.
Uh-oh. A millionaire with no face.
After analyzing complex financial records, the Yu family is eventually found to own the ferry. The Yus are well known for their eccentric patriarch, a reclusive businessman slash cult-like pastor slash aspiring artist named Yu Byung-on. The president says he and his family are the root cause of this calamity and issues a warrant for their arrest. Yu Byung-on keeps a low profile and is rarely seen in public. He's known as the millionaire with no face. And now, he's nowhere to be found.
Oh, of course. He disappeared like this.
President Park kicks off the largest manhunt in South Korean history to find Yu. She mobilizes the military and nearly 10,000 police officers to raid the headquarters of the Evangelical Baptist Church of Korea, a religious sect that Yu co-founded in 1962. Yu is a charismatic and inspiring speaker. He was able to attract a substantial following and elicit substantial favors. By the 1970s, Yu's growing church became a money-making enterprise. He persuaded members to donate to or invest in companies linked with the church. Those companies sold a wide range of products, from organic milk to auto parts to anima kits. These companies made Yu and his church very rich. At that time, South Korea was still poor and money for investment was scarce. The government granted capital to only a select number of families, but Yu's approach of raising funds through evangelizing allowed him to rapidly grow his businesses even without governmental support. By the 1980s, his business network was considered a mini Chebo. But then, controversy hits. In 1987, 32 alleged members of Yu's church were found bound, gagged, and dead in the attic of a factory near Seoul. The authorities ruled the deaths as a murder-suicide pact linked to debts they couldn't pay. After the victims' financial records were probed, money was found going to Yu. He was investigated for suspicion that he was behind the alleged suicides, but charges were dismissed due to lack of evidence. Nevertheless, courts did find evidence that he was using church members' money and properties to enrich his businesses. In 1992, Yu was jailed for fraud.
You got lucky and get murdered.
Once released from jail, Yu attempts to restore his image. He gets really into nature photography and starts exhibiting his work under the pseudonym Ahe. He pays top museums worldwide like the Louvre to display his pictures and tries to build a reputation as an art star who is rarely seen in public. All, it appears, as an effort to distract from the negative press. He also continues to be invested in various businesses. One of his more profitable ventures is this shipping company. At least $3.8 million went directly to the Yu family. It's the same company that owns and runs the Seevol ferry. 2 months after the ferry sank, Korean police raid Yu's compound.
Damn!
Hundreds of sect members are protesting the raid and attempt to build a blockade. A large banner reads,
No way.
Sect members are protesting the raid.
That's crazy.
And attempt to build a blockade. A large banner reads, "We'll protect Yu Byung-yeon even if 100,000 church members are all arrested." Helicopters swirl overhead. Some cult members threaten to fight the police. Others vow to die as martyrs. But after combing the
Dude,
massive
that's crazy.
compound, the cops leave empty-handed. They don't know it yet, but Yu is hiding in a secret closet 300 kilometers away in his holiday home. A few days after the raid, and 18 days after Yu was last spotted, a farmer finds a dead body face up in an orchard. It's in an advanced state of decomposition, almost skeletal. It's at first impossible to tell who it is. The corpse is wearing expensive Italian clothes and is surrounded by bottles of rice wine, a bottle of shark liver oil, and a book written by Yu. After a 3-day autopsy and over a month of investigation, authorities confirmed that it is indeed Yu. A cause of death is never determined.
It ain't not him. I'm telling you guys
More
that right
and more
now.
damning evidence keeps coming out about the government and the ferry. Auditors discovered that Coast Guard officials apparently turned a blind eye to the ferry's glaring safety problems after getting courted by Yu's shipping company over drinks at lavish dinners. Some admitted to letting the ferry pass through inspection points, only guessing from a distance whether the ferry was overloaded. A major factor in its excessive weight turned out to be a marble art gallery on board. Yu personally insisted on adding it to display his artwork on the ferry. One man's greed had sunk the seawall ferry, and as more and more South Koreans were starting to believe, the government's negligence had let it happen. Some Korean families like Yu's are wealthy enough to convince government employees to turn a blind eye to their misdeeds like fudging ferry inspections. But the really powerful ones can command much more than that. And one family holds truly unmatched power, casting a shadow over all others.
Chapter 3. The Crown Prince of Samsung. Oh shit.
In the months after the Seawall tragedy, candlelight vigils turn into weekly protests, calling for truth and accountability for the government's involvement in the disaster.
Damn.
Frustration grows and people start demanding for Park to be impeached.
That's crazy.
The government cracks down hard in response. Police use water cannons and pepper spray on thousands of protesters. Authorities illegally collect intelligence on mourning families in order to suppress anti-government protests. But anger and frustration continue
There's so many people.
to grow. And in 2016, another huge scandal erupts. It reveals that President Park is most certainly not the leader who will rein in chaebol power. In fact, she's especially cozy with South Korea's most powerful chaebol families. Illegally cozy.
Of course.
President Park is found entangled in a web of backroom deals with leaders of Samsung and other corporate executives. Park accepted substantial bribes in exchange for governmental favors. Samsung made a $36 million donation to her best friend's nonprofit, which Park rewarded by greenlighting a controversial merger. This merger gave the Samsung family even more control over the country's most powerful chaebol. The head of the family is Lee Jae-young, often called the Crown Prince of Samsung. The bribery scandal toppled Park's presidency.
피청구인 대통령 박근혜를 파면한다.
She was the first ever president of South Korea to be impeached. She was sentenced to 24 years in prison and
24 years in prison?
$17 million. Lee Jae-young was also sentenced to 24 years in prison and fined $17 million. Lee Jae-young was also arrested and sentenced to 2.5 years.
That's not bad for him.
Park is succeeded by Moon Jae-in. He promises not to pardon anyone convicted of corruption. But the influence of Samsung and Lee Jae-young proved difficult to curb. Moon ends up pardoning him after just 1 year. The new president admits that those who condemn Lee's crimes are in the right, but that the nation needs him. The economy relies too heavily on Samsung to have its leader in jail.
He messed up too.
With so much power, Lee Jae-young is effectively above the law. And in some ways, this pardon was just business as usual. Lee's father had also been convicted of bribery and fraud in the 90s, but hadn't served a day of his sentence. A 2022 poll recorded 70% of the public approving the decision. Experts say it's because people fear an economic downturn. They believe if Samsung does well, South Korea does well. Lee continues to occupy a top position at Samsung, now as CEO of Samsung Electronics. He's also the country's richest person. Already before, President Moon unexpectedly pardoned the former President Park after she
She pardoned her?
served 5 years of her sentence. The reason he gave
Wow.
was to promote the people's unity. The dictator's daughter and the crown prince of Samsung both walk free. And while many everyday South Koreans express frustration with corruption, chaebol still hold considerable appeal. They're by far
that's
the most desirable places to work.
corrupt.
Top chaebol offer much higher wages than regular companies. Every year, over 200,000 South Koreans scramble to apply for Samsung. As long as South Korea's wealthiest families control so much of the country's economy, the question remains if real reform is even possible.
I don't think so, because that's crazy. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, grind 100K, grind our stars.
Bye, have a great time.